Welcome to another episode of B2B Startup Growth. I'm Sean McHouse, and in this podcast, I aim to share with you wisdom from some of the smartest B2B startup leaders and professionals that I know. We talk about all aspects of marketing, sales, growth hacking, life hacking, and everything in between. Hi, Amit.
Hi, Sean.
Very, very happy to finally speak with you on record.
Same here, likewise.
And I'd love to first give you an opportunity to quickly introduce yourself. I'm sure a lot of my listeners have heard of you and are looking forward to hearing what you have to share. But for those who don't know you, please give us a little introduction to what you do today and about your current company and your current role.
Great. So, hi everybody, my name is Amit Daniel. I'm currently the CMO of Checkmarx, who is the leading provider in AppSec security, existing in the market for 17 years now, market leader, Gartner, all the analysts in terms of AppSec. And I'm in charge of all the marketing activities. I joined Checkmarx almost 4 months ago, so I'm relatively new to the company. And before that, basically working 25 years in iTech, doing product management, marketing, strategy, channel sales as well, in B2B tech companies, different ones, different sizes.
Can you just to fill in for people who are not sure what AppSec is, give us a frame?
Sure. The simplest way to think about it is that everything that you do today is transformed in terms of its digital transformation, which means that there is code that is written everywhere, in refrigerators, in cars, in software, clearly it's all over. And when there's so much software around it, it means there's much more risk. And every company, every enterprise that develops today software, whether it's in healthcare, financial, technology provider, they all write code and they have development teams in-house. And there are risks and vulnerabilities inside their code. So what the AppSec world is doing, and it's keep on expanding and going in different directions, is that we look at the entire development cycle that is done inside the company. And we are assisting in scanning that code across different technologies, different types of deployments, whether it's in the cloud or within the servers of the organizations internally. And we make sure that we identify those vulnerabilities as early as possible in the development to make sure that the code that is being released outside is secure. And that's a critical element today.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so listen, I thought a lot about what to start with you because there's so many different aspects of your experience that we could tap into. But one of the things that stood out to me, especially about you, is that I happened to have an interaction with you lately related to Checkmarx, and I was really, really surprised to see how quickly you came into this role and set some new activities and goals and moved forward very, very aggressively, super quick. And I felt like this was really unusual to what I'm seeing when CMOs are coming into a new role in a new company. And so I wanted to put the spotlight on this topic with you a little bit and ask you this. First of all, I know that you're new to your role in Checkmarx. How long have you been there right now?
4 months now.
4 months, okay. So 4 months is sort of in the area of what I call this 100 days grace that nobody really gives the CMO. Okay, there's this term 100 days of grace that you get when you get a new job, and from my experience, CMOs don't really get that because everybody expects them to deliver immediately. Because so I'd love to ask you this. What is your approach of coming into a new company? You've done it a few times in your career, coming into a new company and learning what the absolute must that you need to learn first about the situation and then starting to move things. What is your approach to that?
Well, I think that if I will need to write a book one day for, just like you mentioned, the first 90 days and activities that CMOs needs to do when they enter a job. And again, it's not that, I'm a magician or anything. It's just based on best practices and experience that I gained and mistakes that I've done also in the years. I think the most important one, at least for me, is first to understand and to connect tightly. After I understand quickly, the market and where we play and what's AppSec, because I didn't grow within the AppSec as an example. And I hear a lot about that also that was part of my discussions with analysts and external people and internal people about the market and our offering. The first thing was to connect to the strategy and the vision of what's our goals, our business goals as a company. Because I believe that what happens there is that you can immediately go and understand, maybe it's not 100% accurate, but very fast, you can actually understand the gaps and where are the areas of impact and value that marketing can fit in and bring the value to the company. And it might change from one company to the other, depending on the situation of the marketing, the situation of the market, the vision. For me, that was, I think, the most important thing, because I immediately realized that there are a few things that can be a great impact for me and my team. And we can talk maybe in
how much of that could you see even before you took the role, as you were interviewing and learning about this opportunity for you? Were you already, when you took the role, did you already have in mind a sort of a plan?
I understood many things, because you speak with people, different versions, different people from different angles. So I could understand some of the things that I need to do, but you do not really always understand it until you get to an organization inside and you actually meet the people and ask them questions about the strategy and the go-to-market and the vision and, where we want to be in 3 years. And once you understand that, even if it's not 100% clear and, let's say, precise, it gave me a very good indications of my priorities. So, for example, for me, I'm a true believer that as marketing, there's tendency sometimes to start from things that are much more, I call them, out there in the window, like rebranding and visuals, which are important for the story, but my recommendation is not to start with that. So for me, the fact
always, or specifically in the case that you found in Checkmarx?
I think that unless it's a complete disaster, and that's the major impact, that you will live or die without, I wouldn't suggest to start it. And I'll explain why. Because I think that gives a different message. Live externally. It's a different message even internally to people perceiving marketing inside the organization. I believe that the impact and the value that marketing brings is in the connection of the story, the narrative, the business goals. And if you start from that, it's much easier to accept other changes that you would like to do. And potentially, rebranding or stretching brand will come in, but it will be much easier to adopt and understand it internally because you have something greater than the visual identity. You have the story. You understand what you want to tell. Who are your targeted audiences? What's your priority there? What's your strategy? Is it a strategy of PLG or whether it's a strategy of ABX that you want to apply? That's, for me, is much more critical to understand as early as possible in the 90 days of the CMO, because it implies on everything. So one of the things was really to understand and to align with management, with sales, with all the people that are critical for that. That's one thing. The other thing was for me to meet all my existing team. I'm entering in organizations. There were many things that were done prior to me entering, to understand who are the people, what's their roles and responsibility, what works, what doesn't, what is missing, to try and understand the gaps. And I think that once you have these two elements, it gives you a very, very good indications of what you need to prioritize, where you need to focus, what you need to start, and how you're actually able within a short period of time to generate an impact. For me, it's critical, especially when a CMO comes in. As you mentioned, you don't have a huge grace period. I don't think it exists in any position, not only for marketing. And therefore, you need to decide where will you create the impact, where your mark will be seen. Other things can come afterwards. So for me, those were the two important things. And as part of the first 3 months, it actually happened. And what happened out of that? Now, sometimes you have also, let's say, I call it situations that enforce you to meet timelines. So for example, in my case, I joined in October, and in January, we had already our kickoff, which was a huge event.
Kickoff of what? Explain what kickoff means.
We have kickoff event every year. It's a sales kickoff, but it's a kickoff that we do for the entire company. So they're basically, besides aligning everybody to the strategy and goals and what we want to do as a company, for me, it was critical that if there are any gaps in how the marketing supports it, what's the narrative and the story of Checkmarx that I want to build, it's very difficult to do it within a very short period of time. But it was like a showstopper that I said, listen, even if it will not be perfect, I must be in a situation that I'm not losing that opportunity. It's a huge stage that you get once per year to make sure.
Who participates in the kickoff?
In the sales kickoff, it's an event of all our sales and all, let's say, the customer-facing teams and the people that support it. But all of that material is used then in all ends for the entire company. So it's basically the management is taking all the messages to all the company to make sure that we're all aligned and we understand where we're heading and our vision and strategy and focus and what we want to do differently. So for me, it was critical not to lose that opportunity. I mean, and I remember that when we sat, with the team and we said, okay, this is the strategy. This is what we and marketing can contribute that. And it was clear that building in the narrative and the story and taking it internally inside the company before we take it externally, it was a critical element for me to bring it in January. And it was a team effort, with my team, my marketing team that are amazing. It's an amazing, amazing team. I really love and appreciate everybody that are there, the newcomers and the people that were in Checkmarx before. And it was a team effort. And we came out with a story that everybody loved. And we're going to launch it externally from Q2.
So I'd like, Amit, I'd like to ask you to be more specific. So can you share, you came in and you mapped and you interviewed and you understood the current story and situation. And now, as preparing for the kickoff, you wanted to design it or refocus it. Could you take us through this specifics of this change? What was the change? What was it before, and where do you want to take it later?
Well, I can't tell you the story yet because it's going to be officially outside from Q2, and we want to have a big launch and surprise around it.
Okay.
But we can talk about the process. I mean, the process was to identify our current situation. You need to look, of course, critically at the strategy. So if it's a targeted approach, an ABX approach, what does it mean? Who are your buying personas? Who are the influencers that you need to keep in mind, even though they do not own the budget and don't influence immediately, the purchase cycle? Competition analysis, and then how we are perceived today versus where we want to be perceived with the new strategy and vision that we have in hand. What blocks us from doing that? Now, we analyzed as part of that the different channels, the different go-to-market marketing activities that we would like to apply, what we're missing. And what happened is that we were able, it assisted me so much, me and my team, my management team and the entire team, to build in on one side a story, but on the other side to understand the gaps of, let's say, positions, R&Rs, things.
What is R&R?
Roles and responsibilities that we have inside the marketing. So for example, we identified that we have gaps of things that if we want to take it to the market in 23, we need to actually go and bring those positions, or we need to do shifts in what people are doing or the way that they're doing. So it's really assisted me in building the structure of the organization and fine-tune the roles and responsibilities of people. So people stayed in their roles, but they did it differently. Because if in the past, for example, we used to work less in ABX and much more spread across different, countries and tiers, and the go-to-market was a bit different. Now, when you're shifting into ABX, it includes certain types of elements that you must have in place in order to meet that strategy, and then to see how you're telling the story. So I think if you start, and it's a critical one for me, if you start from the strategy and understanding where are your priorities there in terms of marketing, because I can tell you right away, when the strategy and vision was clear, there was a huge list of things that we could do an impact, but we couldn't do it all because it was clear that it's too much. So even the discussion then to come and say, okay, we focus on X, for example, new businesses versus existing customers that we support. Are we doing it across all territories? Are we doing it across all channels? Are we targeting all the buyers, or we focus on specific? All of those discussions came out, so we could actually make sure that we build in the right structure, the right processes, the right approaches, and the story that fits it in order to take it to the market. And we've managed to do it. And again, it's not always the case, because sometimes it takes time, to build that. But we were managed to do it within three months, and to actually now focus on making sure that all the teams inside the marketing are aligned in terms of goals and KPIs, and building the methodologies and going to execute it. And it's not a simple task. It's not like everything is. Now we're getting into the tough part, because the tough part is the execution and putting everybody on the same board and building in the processes.
Wait a second. Execution is very tough, but before that, in my mind, it's very difficult to come to an organization and tell them, listen, I need to prioritize now, and there's ABC things that we used to do that I don't want to do this year, right? Mm-hmm. That's a hurdle to pass. Can you share a little bit of how that went through? Was it like nicely accepted by your reasoning and that's it? Or did you have to go through some process to get people aligned with that decision? Or also, was it driven by some reduction in marketing budgets along the atmosphere of 2023 budgets all over? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think that generally speaking, and it's regardless if it's in the 90 days or even after 5 years in the company, the only way that marketing will be impactful is if you have very clear communication and transparency with the different stakeholders, whether it's the entire management, clearly, specifically the sales team. That should be your, at least for my side, it needs to be my BFF. Because if it doesn't work like that, and we do not align to the same KPIs, to the same goals, and agree between us that this is what we're going to do and prioritize, it never works, because otherwise it's working in silos. So I think that once I understood, the situation, and we all live in a situation that we're working usually with less budget because of the recession, and you need to think out of the box and invent yourself. By the way, I don't think that the situation out there, it's always nice to work with unlimited resources and budgets. It's not always, by the way, effective. But I think that the fact that you need to do things differently make you be much more creative and do things that otherwise you weren't forced to do. So I think that the situation, and especially when you enter, a new company in a scenario, macroeconomic situation like we have today, from the beginning, it was clear to me and my team that what we need to do is we cannot ignore it. We cannot say 21, 22 will be the same like 23. So intentionally, from the beginning, once we build and we talked about what's the priority and what we want to do and what we're saying, it's not that it's not needed, but we just can't handle it now. It's impossible. We don't have the capacities, we don't have the infrastructure.
Can you
Do
give
not-
examples of things that you decided to leave out of the 23 plan due to this
Yes.
reason?
It came across in many things. It came across, for example, where is my focus now? New customers, bringing new logos and growth from new customers, or growth that will come from cross-sell and upsell within our existing customers, okay? Or where do I prioritize? Now, it's not necessarily one versus the other, but it's also an issue of, bundling. I want to do part of that and part of that, but is it 50-50? Is it 80-20, 80-20? And it impacts my execution and my efforts, my resources, my budgets. What do I do more? Am I depending, for example, on leads coming in mostly on inbound, or being much more proactive in doing outbound and putting focus? For example, the SDRs, BDRs team is in my responsibility as well, which I'm a strong believer. It's a critical element for the success of marketing team. And I know that it's not always the case.
Yes.
And so what does it mean on my team? I mean, if they were focusing on inbound, what does it mean? I need to bring new methodologies. I need to work differently when you need to do outbound and outreach. Different skills of people as well. For example, I think that in situations like that, many of the things that you do in the field, and many salespeople are used to it, are based on events. So you go to industry events and you go to trade shows. And I'm a true believer that if you're working in ABX, you don't necessarily need all of that, because it's less targeted and focused on the audiences you want to reach. So, for example, to prioritize and come and say, listen, this is the strategy, and based on the budget and resources that we have, these are our recommendations. But, and going back now to the beginning of your questions, once we had the plan, even if it wasn't yet 100% signed, we then took it to our main partners. So we took it inside the management to present and explain why we can't do it all. What do we think is important for us to do, and how we're going to do it, and what we will do in the next 6 months to start with, how we're going to measure it, how we're going to show what worked. The fact that we had to come and tell people, listen, we're going to do many things that are differently now, but be prepared, we're going to do mistakes, and we're open to that, and we'll do it and we'll learn from it, but we will constantly monitoring the stuff and ask ourselves questions. So we did it. We started with management. Then after, we took it inside the VP sales in the different regions, because, they were used to working in a certain manner. Now you need to come and explain why it will be different, but you show them also the explanations of why. So it's not just telling them, that's the plan, take it or leave it. No, let me explain how it will fit into the budget, why I believe that doing it in that budget is more effective than doing that. Please understand, this is going to change the way that you will work. Does it make sense? Do you think that we need to do things differently? And it's not like everybody are 100 receptive and they always tell you yes, and let's go and do it. There were feedbacks, and they were good, and they were important, but it was part of the engagement and the buy-in process that must be done. Just like I wouldn't expect somebody on sales to do something that impacts my marketing department without coming and asking for my consultation. And it needs to happen across the board. Just like, I can take it in marketing to internal communications, employer brand, all of that is also in my team. And it has a very tight relationship with HR. I cannot do it without, speaking with them and thinking my view and getting their feedback. So it requires, and sometimes marketing people forget that internal marketing is not less important than external one. You need to communicate. You need to communicate extensively inside the team. You need to communicate with all your counterparts. You need the company to understand it, because it's part of the process. And that's what all marketing departments should be really best at. It's marketing. So, but sometimes we forget that.
I think, Amit, I don't know if you're aware how unique you are in your ability to do the internal communication to to convince and get support from your from management and other factors within the company. I happened to have a conversation with some colleague friend of mine who used to work for you at your previous company, and from the conversation there, I learned, and that person really appreciated how you helped them grow professionally. He's now a leading CMO somewhere else, and I learned from him how very uniquely successful you are in getting management on board with the marketing plan. So I'd love to get some insights from you on what are some of the recommendations that you can give to CMOs on how to get management on board with your plan, because this is not trivial at all. I come across daily CMOs who are wanting to do ABC, but are not able to get that through to management to agree.
I think the first thing that people need to understand, everybody in marketing, and it's always, I don't think that I'm unique. Okay, I can count on you to say that this is what you see. I think we are marketing people. Okay, the best thing that we do is to market it, but people tend to think all the time about customers and partners and investors and external audiences. The most important people, especially when you do a change management, are your internal customers, and you really need to plan it as part of your initial steps, because otherwise whatever you will do outside will not get the endorsement, will not get the appreciation, will not get the impact. Because once you engage the people inside the organization, whether it's management or it's VP sales or it's I'll give you another example.
Wait, just I have a small question. How, like, if you divide percentage-wise, how much of your attention monthly is put to communicate internally versus all the activities of external? How would you divide that roughly?
I would say that at least now 30-40% is internally, for sure. Okay. But it's in building trust, especially for newcomers coming in, because it takes time to build trust. People do not know you. They don't know what's your plan. They don't understand necessarily where you're heading. And you constantly need to meet people on one by one. You need, for example, I'm a true believer, and I know that many people usually, and it's really a big mistake. CMO said, I don't have time. I don't have time. I need to do demand generation. I need to support the business. Right. But if you will not spend time talking to the people and engaging them and embracing them as part of what you do, you will not succeed. It's just like employer brand. I have a huge discussion on this one with marketeers that say, I don't have time. I'm dealing with the brand of the company. Employer brand is an HR. It's exactly the same thing. It's one story. If you will not understand that everything that you do is, you are the storyteller, okay? The CMOs are the storytellers of the company. So the first customers you need to engage are your own employees. And it starts from management until everybody. You need to constantly communicate. You need to go, I'll give you an example. I participated a week ago and the week before in our kickoff that we did for our R&D and product management teams here in Israel and in Portugal. So besides just the narrative that for me it was important they will all understand, it was also what marketing is going to come and do for you. Now, those are developers, so people will come and say, why is it important? It's not even sell. It is critical because they are the ones that develop the product. They are the ones that really proud of what they do. And if they will see how I'm going to take it as marketing to tell it externally, they will come to me also with ideas and stories that I can use in order to leverage my brand. Now, potentially I could say, listen, it's not important. I can put it in 2 years from now. No, because that's creating the trust and the engagement from day one. And I'm a true believer in that. It's really It's in my
This is
face.
going really far here. This is a very unique example, because I don't know many CMOs who are spending that much time with R&D.
I think that we need to do it much more. If I could spend 100% of my time with my internal customers and make sure that all the rest is done, without my support, I would do it. Unfortunately, it's not the case, but it's impossible that it will be 100% external, just impossible.
Wow. Yeah, I agree with you totally. Wow. I'd love to ask you now something that's maybe on a slightly different topic, but something that I've been personally really interested in, and would love to hear your input on that. You've been in your career leading marketing for B2B companies, and a lot of them are in areas that commonly people might say that are not very exciting in terms of their content, their visuals, their marketing material is all very, very professional and technical and not so sexy. And still, we want to engage people, humans, and there is this secret element of content that is really attractive. And I'd love to hear your take on what makes content stand out, what makes content really, really good, aside from the, of course, it needs to be relevant and quality and reliable and all of that. That's trivial. Could you shine a light on what you think is the special sauce that makes content really successful nowadays, with professionals being so bombarded with noise?
I think that you clearly cannot ignore, especially in the middle of the funnel and the bottom of the funnel, when you need to convert, you need to bring then the professional content. I think that people have less patience today for reading. We know it on ourselves. We don't have patience to read long stuff. It needs to be catchy, snappy, very quick to understand, videos, infographics. Save me the time. And people, I think most of the things, and I'll talk in a second about the top of the funnel, I think that many of the things that we need to do, we need always to think what they're going to do with it. Okay, so for example, I'm doing now infographics for someone. I need to think how he's taking it to his manager, not how he consumes it for himself personally. So for example, if I can see how he will take that small dashboard, report, whatever, not 30 pages, because nobody will take 30 pages, but if he will take it and will say, listen,
you actually don't prepare any 30-page kind of report anymore?
We do. Again, I wouldn't say 30, but it's not, everything is not, very, very short. But to catch, to get the hook, it must be really, really appealing and catchy. And then if somebody wants to get more information, he wants to see the entire ebook, he wants to see the entire survey, clearly he will take it. But in order to get the hook, it needs to be something much more, in his face, clear. And I think the issue there is to say, okay, would I take that one if I was a CISO of a company? Would I take it to my CIO? Would I take it to my CEO? Would I put it in my presentation, because I know that that will be something appealing for him, that he will say, wow, that's a great slide, I want to take it for my management. That's what needs to sit, in the back of our minds. And sometimes, it's people tend to think, I need to give him all the details and the technology. No, we're humans, all of us. Think about yourself when you consume content. I think that the other thing is that, and this is something that I've seen also in my previous jobs, and clearly we're going to do it now as well, is people it was interesting that you said in the beginning, what CMOs do in the first 90 days that they do. That's a topic that if I am, for example, a company that is selling to CMOs, regardless if you're selling a software to CMOs, you can actually write an article about, And even though you're not plugged in, it has nothing to do with your software, but this by itself will give a secret sauce and insights if it will be coming from insights coming from CMO that many people will download, okay? So what does it mean? It means that if you want to get exposure, if you want to capture the person on the other side, you do not necessarily need to write everything related to what your company's technology is doing. You actually need to think constantly again, what's in it for the person in front of me. So it's a CISO. I can write the same thing. What, for example, CISO wants to get in order to convince his CFO today to get budget. Is it related to application security? No. Is it relevant for CISOs? Yes. So once I get it, and it will be written exactly from the perspective of the user, which is a CISO, he would love to get it because this is something that is valuable for him. And through that, I can get in and start the interaction in my content, whatever is relevant to me. So I think, it's always more complex because you need to open and think differently on what you're doing. It's simpler to always connect to the content related to your software, technology, industry, because this is where we all grow. But I think that the way that you think differently on how you do it, and especially today when you're limited in resources and budget. So I'll give another example. I told my team, we are not going to go to industry events. We'll pick only the ones that are critical for our thought leadership and brand awareness. The others, let's do stuff differently. Let's do beer tasting. Let's build in a van outside across the street of the industry event and bring the targeted audience we want to bring there. Why? Because this is my strategy and it's much more effective for me. So it comes across in so many directions and activities that marketing can do. Content, activities, SDRs, BDRs, across the board, everything.
So you've mentioned it, and we know the situation now is that because a lot of marketing activities have shrunk, there is a situation in the market now that a lot of marketers are out there really looking for the next thing to do. A lot of marketers that are looking for jobs or looking to grow in the industry. And it connects me to a question that I would really love to hear your take on. And that is, in light of what's changing now and what's hot now, what would you recommend to marketers who are hoping to prepare themselves for their next step in the career? Are there areas where you think it would be really useful nowadays to study, to develop yourself, to focus on, so that it would make you a better candidate for the job market of the next few months?
Yeah, I think that many of the things that we have seen, and I can say it also on myself personally, I wish that I would have done some of the things differently also when I was younger. But I think that in the past, many people in marketing thought about it like in silos. So if you have expertise in demand generation, this is your expertise. So you have a development in PPC, in marketing automation, whatever. And I think that one of the things that you see today is that in order to be really, really, really effective as marketeers, especially marketeers that are leaders, you need to be very versatile. And for that, you cannot just come and say, okay, I only understand in product marketing, or I only specialize in regional marketing or whatever. You must learn, grow, educate, test yourself, even do it yourself in many, many areas, because the discipline of being a marketing leader today is so complex. It's not in silos anymore. I mean, if you look even at activities and campaigns that are running, it's no longer just, okay, do we know to use the right platforms and to set up the right campaign? It all merges with design and storytelling and targeting customers. So you actually need to really understand, and how do you analyze and measure it? So you really need to learn so many things together. It's really complex. And the art of again, I'm not a true believer that everything in marketing needs to be measured, okay? It needs to be measured, but not everything can be. But you need to understand it. You need to understand where you put the lines, how you measure, what you measure, where you stop and say, no, it doesn't make sense, let's stop it. There are other things than just measuring it. But for that, you need to be really wide and open to learn and understand other activities beyond just the structure in the team that you belong to, the sub-team in marketing. And I think that if people are looking to really grow and develop, they need to shift. So they need, and by the way, it's not so simple, because unfortunately, most of the organizations, when they're looking for people, they're trying to get the people that did exactly the same position previously, and they bring in exactly the same expertise, because we all usually want that. It's like, you get a tick in the box. And I think that at least, and that's my view as well, it used to be always allocate few percentage of your team members that are coming from different places, different industries, they're coming with different background, because they will disrupt your thinking, they'll bring something new to diversity. It must happen. And give them the chance, because sometimes I can tell you that the majority of the things that were very creative and different in my team came from people that didn't bring the best knowledge and expertise from their years in marketing, but because they took a different approach and they came from a completely different area. So that's one thing. And the other thing, I think, with everything that is happening now with AI and content generation and ChatGPT and all of that, I think there is lots of more for us as marketing to go and see and understand how we utilize it, what we do with it, how do we optimize the way that we generate content. It's a huge, I think, black box for many marketeers today that we still need to understand and learn. And I think that all of that area, new software is coming in, new capabilities. At the end of the day, there's plenty of softwares and AI, too much that a marketing company can even capture. It's like a huge mess. It's understanding that, prioritizing, be focused, but have a wide view on what you have as an options, and then come and pick out of that. So the bottom line is be flexible, be open, constantly learn and do things beyond what you already know.
So your advice is in order to be able to be a leader, you need to have a wide understanding of marketing, and marketing is so diverse now. And I love that advice, and thank you. But can I also ask you on the flip side of that? When you're now, because you're hiring probably people in many, many different disciplines under marketing, can you identify specific areas where today it's more difficult for you to find talent? Because that would highlight the places where people might say to themselves, okay, that's a place where there's a lot of potential for me to grow into.
I think an area that was always problematic was product marketing. Clearly, it's always been the case, and to have very strong product marketeers is always a place that you need strong people that are very versatile, by the way, because they need to understand many aspects involved in value propositions and how to take it, and strategy and go to market. So that's an area that I think more talent has to grow in different countries, and it's critical for the success of marketing. I see, by the way, also great potential in teams of SDRs and BDRs. They're critical for the success of marketing team. They're critical for the success of a company, okay? Regardless where they reside, if it's sales or marketing. And I think that if you talk about giving potential to people that didn't come from BDR background, okay? But people that there are certain, let's say, characteristics or behaviors or personalities, and they're usually also junior people starting their, life inside the tech. I think it's a huge place for people then to go and to grow within either sales or marketing teams. And you can actually see the talent there when they're very, very, very successful in what they do. And if you have a very strong team to educate and mentor them, because it's really their starting point. So I think at least these two areas, there are many other positions that are critical. Marketing, is like a puzzle. You need all the pieces coming together. But those are areas that, let's say, I think that more talent is required, and you clearly need there are places to grow and to have additional people coming in. And demand generation, is always, basically it's all over. But these are the most critical, I think, places that lack talent.
Can you actually tell us shortly what was your path? How did you become qualified yourself as a CMO? Where did you come from?
My story is different because I started from product management, which is very special. Usually marketings do not start from product management and then shift to marketing. Sometimes it happens exactly the other side around. So I started from product management and then led product management teams. And because my background is coming from business and marketing, so I always knew that this is something that I wanted to do. So I grew, usually I did few teams. So I did strategy, product management, marketing, and also business development, as I mentioned, the sales channels. And I think, at least for me, I'm a true believer in this one, but it's not always the case. It's not a must. When you're growing from product management into marketing, you have different aspects to look at things because you clearly understand the customers, the markets, the product, the technology. And then all your view about marketing is very much connected to the business and the challenges and understanding, other views that I'm not saying it's impossible to understand if you grew only for marketing. It also depends from where, but it gives you a different view. I love marketing. I think it's a critical element for the success of the company. You cannot do it without that, but you need to be versatile. I mean, even if I look at myself, I grew with it. I mean, I learned and brought different disciplines inside it. And I believe that marketing can do much more than the traditional things that are in marketing, like, internal marketing, employer brand, SDRs, BDRs. I believe they need to be part of the marketing teams.
Can I use this opportunity to have you explain why is it so important for the CMO not to neglect the employer branding side of the...
It's like 3 hours discussion with me. I'm lecturing on that because I'm trying to always explain CMO.
No, because it's very unique that you are taking responsibility for it. I see a lot of companies where they shifted to HR.
And they shifted because of the wrong reasons, unfortunately, I must say. And by the way, it's not a shift. I cannot do it without HR. It's just like I cannot do marketing without sales, okay? But again, employer brand is your brand. It doesn't, when we talk about marketing about audiences, we say customers, investors, analysts, partners, employees. What about them? Potential recruits. What about them? There's one brand to a company. You cannot have a strong brand as a company if you are not connecting all your audiences under the same narrative. The channels might be different. The activities, you'll need to fine-tune the story when it comes to your internal employees versus candidates you want to recruit. But think about it. It's exactly the same thing. If I need to recruit people, I need to apply exactly the same activities that I'm doing to recruit prospects. What's the difference? And HR needs to support and work with me so I will align to their target and strategy. But it's not only for recruitment, it's for people to be proud of where they work. It's critical for us to, let's say, execute our strategy and business goals. And I cannot understand a marketing person that is willing to give it away. It's like a huge mistake.
Huge mistake. I agree with you.
It's a huge mistake. And it usually comes in, I can tell you in my discussions with many CMOs, they tell me, I don't have the budgets. I don't have the resources. I don't have the time. So find it. Why for other stuff in marketing? It's obvious to you. Find it, fight for it. Go and explain internally to management why it's important. Show them what you can bring and create an impact that other teams cannot do. Do it. How can you give it up? For me, it's a huge issue that I fail to understand why people are neglecting
it. Okay, so unfortunately, I know we could go on to 100 different topics, but our time doesn't allow me to do that now. So I'd like to just as a closing question to ask you something that I often ask my interviewees, and that is there anything that you know of today about marketing that you wish your younger self had known like 5 or 10 years ago?
I can say about myself, again, I'm not sure it's only marketeer. I would say it as a person. I think to be much more flexible, to be much more open-minded, not to think that everything that you think is always the right way. There are many other people, even that are not marketeers, that can contribute and can bring insights from directions that you can never even anticipate. And I think that especially for marketeers today that needs to think out of the box is, and I fight it myself because I'm a very opinionated person, and I think that it's one of my, let's say, weaknesses that I'm fully aware of. You really need to be open. When you think that you know it all, try to stop, say, let's consult with others, let's share more people in the discussion. I think that I'm doing it better today, but there's always a place for improvement. But when I was younger, it was much more difficult for me. And I think it's also an issue of growing up.
You're suggesting to try to adopt more humility as you grow.
Yeah, it's humility, it's openness, it's flexibility, it's less ego, it's across the board. And I'm a people's person, so I love people. I can never work in a standalone situation. I love my teams that I work with. They're like, I don't like to use the term family because family is not the same thing like working with people, but be more open. I mean, be more flexible and less, I don't know what's the right term to use, but it's mostly flexibility. It's mostly, don't think that you know it all.
Yeah. I think that when you apply that, and you're probably applying it quite successfully, it just increases the chance that people will trust you. So yeah, that's another motivation to be more humble and flexible.
Yeah.
Amit, I can't thank you enough.
It was my pleasure.
It was a pleasure to hear you again about sharing your experience, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Sean, for the opportunity.
Loved it. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the B2B Startup Growth Podcast, bringing you the latest wisdom on marketing, sales, growth hacking, and life as a startup leader. I'm your host, Shoham Eckhaus, and if there's a particular topic that you'd like me to cover soon, please reach out to me on b2bstartupgrowth.com and let me know.